you're up to. All right. Well, I'm really excited, everybody, to welcome Kristina Latino from Cornerscape Management. Kristina will tell you plenty about herself, but she's an amazing manager, and it's been very impressive to watch the artists on her roster do some crazy, amazing stuff. Elisa Amador won the Tiny Desk and watched. Who's unmuted? I'm gonna mute your butts when you accidentally make noise. Elisa, we watched some videos from NPR. She won the Tiny Desk under your management, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so some just awesome artists under your tutelage, I guess you'd say, under your management. So we're really excited to have you here, and feel free to introduce yourself. And then I have asked all the students to prepare questions. So really you can keep a quick intro, and then we'll just go around and see what people want to know.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. I actually grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts, so it's fun to get to talk to you guys. So yeah, just to give you a quick intro, my name's Kristina. I'm an artist manager. I've been a manager for the last 7 years. Before that, my background was in live music event production. So I started as a sound engineer and venue manager, and came to management pretty gradually. After I started just helping some artists I had met through music venues with side projects. One of them eventually encouraged me to try management. So I've been an independent manager since then. We can talk about this more, but there are kind of different paths into management. One might be starting at a larger company as a more what's called like a day-to-day manager under the management of another manager. And one path is independent, where you just, you kind of start it on your own, build a roster, build out your company from there. So I am a huge music lover. I feel like that should go without saying, but to work in this industry, really love of music is a prereq. So huge lover of music, especially of lyrics, of great songwriting, and kind of pop sounds. So I come to management really with a songwriting focus. And yeah, I'll be excited to chat with you guys. We can kind of jump right into questions, but I'd love to just get a sense from, I'm not sure if you've covered this already, like, do you guys already know kind of the various roles on an artist's team? For example, like manager versus booking agent versus label versus distributor versus lawyer versus radio promoter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I haven't gone through that yet. I think it's coming, but it would be amazing to hear it from you.
Cool. So just before we dive into questions, then I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on kind of the different, really like what most basic level, what my job is and how it fits into the artist team, and then we can toss it to you guys. So, yeah, so if you've got an artist or a band that has successfully grown a team around them to support their business, typically that team has a lot of different companies and people on it. So you've got booking agents who typically book for territories, so the United States or Europe or North America, et cetera. And these booking agents are people who are just responsible for booking, negotiating contracts and deals, and routing tours. So they make money as a percentage of live music revenue. Then you have, let's say, a label and a distributor. These are companies that are sometimes blended now, sometimes distinct, but they're in charge of getting your music up on Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, Amazon, what have you, and promoting it to them. And then a label, of course, is responsible for often funding the creation of new music and then marketing that new music and selling that new music. You have a publicist who's in charge of promoting your artist brand at digital and print media, things like, in the New York Times or the LA Times or NPR. You have a radio promoter. So when you turn on the radio and you're scrolling through different stations, each radio station has what's called a format. So, Kiss 108 is like a pop format if you listen to like The River, that's like AAA, adult contemporary. If you listen to, I mean, country is a really obvious one, but you know, it's like you have all these different formats of radio. So typically you can hire a radio promoter who specializes in the format that your artist plays in, and they will work to get the song of your choice kind of up the charts on those radio stations. You have, and the list really goes on and on. Like there are so many different roles on an artist's team when things are really working. You've got a tour manager, you've got a merch designer, you've got just so many different folks, and then you have the manager. So my job as manager, typically managers are kind of an artist's closest collaborator. You work with the artists on your roster, hopefully over a period of many years, and you manage their business and you manage that team. So you know, you're doing everything from kind of handling little fires that come up to really working long-term strategy, helping decide, all right, what's the story arc of this next year, of this next album? What's the team we need to build around it to promote it? And, you know, where do we go from here? So really, yeah, it's an all-encompassing job. It's almost, sometimes people joke it's like easier to say what an artist manager doesn't do than what an artist manager does, because an artist manager typically doesn't book shows or, you know, do the press pitching, but you're kind of overseeing the people who do that, making sure everyone's on the same page. So that is kind of a quick rundown of just the shape of an artist's team, broadly speaking. And now I'd love to toss it to the class. It would be great. I know a lot of you are interested in being artists, being managers, so I'd love to treat this as a conversation and we can just talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will talk about the team, but it was really amazing for it to come straight from you because you're on the ground and a lot of the books talk about it more theoretically. So it's great to hear from you what you're actually doing in your day-to-day. If you all don't mind, I'm going to moderate a little bit because Zoom can get a little bit chaotic. So when you're ready to ask your question, like Manny has demonstrated, if you could do your raised hand feature, which is under reactions at the bottom of your screen. So raise your hand when you're ready and tell Kristina just a quick, your sort of elevator pitch. Who are you and what are you up to? And then go ahead and ask your question. We may or may not get to all the questions today, but I've seen your homework and I know that you all have prepped questions. So if we don't get to your question, I apologize. But Manny, do you want to start us off?
Hi, my name is Manny. I go by the stage name Glow Manny, and I make alternative R&B, indie, electric music, and rap. My question has changed, but I'll say after you talked about the role of a manager, how can we kind of go about finding the right manager for us and knowing how to filter them if multiple come our way?
It's a great question. It's nice to meet Manny. So I would say that there are a number of ways to find great managers. I guess the first thing I would say is some people will tell you, oh, don't get a manager until you're too busy to do it all yourself. I do not subscribe to that philosophy personally. I kind of feel like if there is a solid manager who is enthusiastic about your music and your career, I think you should start working with that person, you know, as soon as possible. This is, for better or for worse, an industry that prizes youth, that prizes the new. And I think if you're able to build an enthusiastic team around you earlier, that's fantastic. There are a lot of different ways to find a manager. I mean, honestly, a lot of managers these days do A&R through TikTok, through Instagram Reels, finding talent on social media, and may just reach out to you. There are kind of industry conferences that you can apply to showcase your music at, things like South by Southwest or Americana Fest, or DIY Music Fest, I think is still one. There are, so those are kind of opportunities, events where you can go and play for industry folks who are interested in building their teams. You can also reach out to management companies. So many artists and bands will list their team's contact info on their website, sometimes in the footer of the website. And one thing I often encourage artists to do is think about who is an artist who is in a similar genre to you, doing something, that you could see yourself doing, but is like 5 years down the line of your path. Can you go to their website? Can you look and see who their team is? And reach out and ask to have a conversation with those people. And then beyond that, honestly, there's like a very strong word of mouth network, manager to manager. So people often, I'll get emails from other managers all the time that's like, hey, I just heard this great album. Thought it might fit your roster. Are you looking? Do you want to have a conversation with this person? So there are a lot of ways to kind of get yourself out there. And then to the second half of your question, how do you evaluate a good manager? To me, the biggest things are trustworthiness and hard work. Being a manager is definitely a job you can learn while doing. But if you have someone who's trying to make you sign really detailed contracts before you've done anything together, if you have someone, a manager should be making somewhere around 15% of your artist's income. If they're trying to do way more than that, or if they're trying to lock you into something out the get-go and they're not like, obviously really legit for, their past work or whatever, I would have some caution there. But in general, I think if someone is trustworthy, if someone is high integrity, and if someone's hardworking, they can do the job, even if they're starting from, being a classmate, or if you're the first artist they're managing, they could still be a great manager.
Thank you. That was awesome. And I can't help myself but interject sometimes, and I apologize, but
No, please.
I get so many good ideas talking to you all. I will put little resources in the chat as they sort of come to me. Like Kristina mentioned, conferences, and Eric and I go to smaller regional conferences, and we've met basically like half of the people that we end up working with a whole lot are at those smaller regional ones. They're easier to kind of network because they're a lot smaller, so you can meet people, but of course they're genre specific, so they wouldn't be perfect for everybody. The other thing I was going to say, and Kristina, you can agree or disagree with me on this, I would say that from the manager's perspective, it's also very important that you are seeing the hard work and trustworthiness of the artist as well. Like I've heard that over and over and over. A manager, while like you said, you can definitely work with a manager early in your career, they would need to see that you are doing things and drumming up hard work and dedication yourself too. So learning a lot of the indie methods that we're learning this semester is really only going to help you find a manager. I've heard over and over, Rebecca Loby, a singer-songwriter in our circle, always says her first manager told her, I'm not responsible for getting the water flowing. I'm not responsible for generating a river. I'm responsible for helping sort of guide the water. So you should be like figuring stuff out, generating work and working hard so that managers can see that in you and know that they, will have a successful time with you. Does that feel true for you, Kristina?
I would say yes and no. I am a believer that like I believe I should be bringing more water to the river, with my artists. Like I think taking Elisa Amador as an example, I saw her play when she didn't have a team yet. She was very early in her career, thought she was amazing. We stayed in touch for 2 years. I helped her every now and then with like little projects. And then I started to see there was like some industry buzz generating around her. There were a couple labels interested in having conversations. And that was when I said like, hey, I'm sure you're going to be choosing a manager soon. I want to throw my hat in the ring for that conversation. But now, we're heading into a big album campaign for her. Like she's busy to a point now where I kind of feel like her job is share, go play her kick-ass shows, like generate videos, be doing socials, be doing your press interviews, that kind of thing. But it's on me to be building relationships and industry buzz and excitement throughout the industry. So like we're going to be at South by Southwest this year. I've been working closely with her agents to bring in a lot of performance opportunities, media opportunities for her, video session opportunities, things like that. So I don't know. Like I think when people say like you can't want it more than the artist, I do agree with that. Like I want to see an artist working hard, but I also feel like I don't know. If you're doing your job right, you should be generating more fire as well. So I think my perspective on it is like I agree with some elements, but I don't know. When people say stuff like that, I'm always like, does that mean you're just not gonna hustle really hard? So
Yeah,
I
totally.
don't know.
If you and your artist are kind of meeting each other in a very similar like work ethic and passion for what you're doing, I think that would be, a really beautiful relationship if everybody's on the same page about the effort going in. Okay,
Totally.
I promise you I don't want to dominate the conversation. So I saw Miles' hand up a long time ago. So Miles, take it away.
Yeah, I guess my question is mainly like how does one like go about like breaking into the like managing artists industry? Like, do you start by just like managing just artists that you know, or like do you need certain credentials to like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need no credentials. But I would say that there are two main paths. So one path is what you described, just start managing artists you know. And for me, that is kind of the path I took. So for me, that looked like I was fully managing one artist, and then I was doing what I called project management for a number of other artists. So for example, as an artist manager, the way you make your money is you make 15% of the entertainment related income generated by the artists you manage. So there's kind of a period of time where, it's for a developing artist, that's just not very much money at all. So all this to say, I was doing management on commission for one artist, and then I was doing project management for a bunch of really talented development acts who were just trying to get started. So I would work with them on a contract for, let's say, 6 months or 12 months to around an album cycle, where they would give me, hey, this is my album. I want to put it out in a year. What do we do? And I would shop that music around for distribution support. I would build the team. I would oversee that release. And we would just have kind of a monthly fee and a campaign. And it was a great way for me to kind of start, because I was learning how to be a manager, and I was able to kind of, see how different release cycles worked, the things that worked really well, the things that didn't. And it was a great like educational time for me. Since then, I've stopped doing project management. Now I just have artists on my roster who I'm fully managing. But all this to say, like, I'd say that's kind of the independent path. Is you start working with different artists, you get a sense for who are the folks who you want to be on your roster, what kind of artists are they, what kind of business are they producing. The other path is to, I would say, find an internship or, a part-time job with an artist management company. There are a bunch of fantastic ones, and the big ones all have like internship programs, most of which are paid nowadays. So you can kind of start getting a sense for it there, but then the first step would kind of be applying to be what's called a day-to-day manager. So let's say you're managing Miley Cyrus, someone's managing Miley Cyrus. That person, there's too much to do it all themselves. So they would have kind of a person who's one level down called the day-to-day manager, typically a younger person looking to get into management, who is like on the road with that artist a lot. So you're the manager on the ground, and then you're working with that manager at a higher level. And then as you grow as a day-to-day manager, you can start signing your own artists, you can become a senior manager. And then you're kind of within that company structure that has more support. There are different pros and cons to each side. I mean, I think the pro of going the day-to-day to senior manager in a company route is like there's greater stability, there's greater infrastructure for marketing support. You know, you have teammates to learn from and collaborate from all the time. But you are typically, you know, you're making some kind of a salary. Whereas if you're going independent, you're building your own company, you are perhaps lacking some of the larger structure, but there is also a greater potential upside if one of your artists or three of your artists, whatever, become, you know, much more successful. You're reaping a greater reward, and you can build your own company and bring in your own day-to-day managers, your own support, build your own team culture. So I would say those are kind of like the two main paths. But I really think like starting in a company, you know, if I knew in college that I was going to end up in artist management, I think doing a couple of years as a day-to-day with a bigger company would have been invaluable. So I think it's a great option.
Awesome. Thank you. Great question. Riley.
Hi, I'm Riley Forstall. I make music under the name Augie Augustine, and I'm currently working on my first album, Rumor Girls. What makes an artist desirable to work with?
Ooh, great question. I think that question will, you know, it'll differ from manager to manager. For me, the answer is determination, ability to persevere through challenging years and rejection, exceptional artistry. And by that, I mean, I like to work with artists who are the only people who can do what they do. That's kind of the standard to which I now hold folks joining my roster. It's like, are they the only person who does this? And I feel like Elisa is an amazing example of that. She's like, I don't know any other artist like her. And then also, yeah, just really hard work, high integrity. But something I will add these days is also like willingness to engage with social media. You know, there are a lot of artists, and I understand certainly and have a lot of sympathy for the negative mental health effects of social media. But I think there are a lot of artists who are just like, oh, I hate it, I don't want to do it. And it can be like pulling teeth to get them to post twice a month. And that is something where I'm just like, I can't do that anymore. The next person on my roster is going to be someone who like is really comfortable with socials. Yeah, so I think those are the things for me. But really, it's just, I think like the ability to work really hard and grind it out over a period of years is key.
Awesome. Thank you. That was such a good question, Riley. Lane.
Hello. I'm actually not like an artist. I'm actually looking to be the manager. I'm the one that was mentioned earlier.
Yay.
So I was really kind of interested, like the more I've looked into like what it means to like be a manager, like I'm really interested like what your like average day looks like, or like how much work you put into it like on a daily basis, and like how many artists you manage, kind of like more like the nitty-gritty details of like what it looks like to like be where you are right now.
Yeah, it's a great question. I manage 3 artists right now. And it's I'm laughing because it's like I manage 3 artists all right now, and you do kind of work all the time. I'm very lucky that I work with artists who are really respectful of my life. So for example, you know, when I take a vacation every summer, and you know, I got married a little over a year ago, and they didn't bother me with anything the week I got married. But other than that, you know, it's like you are fielding questions and texts and emails in the evenings and on the weekends. You do give up a lot of weekends for shows, for tours. So it definitely is, I mean, it's more than a job, it is a lifestyle. And I think for me, that's fine. Like I really love it. So it doesn't bother me too much that I work a lot. But I think that, you know, that's a balance that everyone is going to have to figure out. In terms of like the day to day, it varies. I mean, in my case, I meet weekly with each of my, I'm like looking at my calendar. I meet weekly with each of my artists on Tuesdays. I try and keep Thursdays kind of free for team meetings. I mean, taking today as an example, I'm talking to you all now. At 11, I have a call with Lisa Amador's European agent. At 3 p.m., we're meeting with Elisa's whole team. So she's at a really exciting moment because we're announcing her album on March 5th. And it's been a very long time coming. She's been working on it for a long time. So that meeting is kind of, you know, a time when we're able to gather the artist, the manager, her label project manager, her distribution, kind of like marketing head, digital marketing team, US booking agents, European booking agent, publicist, radio promoter, head of the label, because it's a high priority project for them. Like it's going to be everyone on that meeting. So I have a lot of work to do. Like yesterday was a lot of preparing for that with her label project manager. Today, we've got some final work to do on that. And then this evening, I've got a meeting for the Recording Academy, which is the company that runs the Grammys. Like I'm helping them with a volunteer initiative in a few months. So we like have a meeting for that. So, you know, that's today. But tomorrow is more focused on my artist, Ken Yates. He tends to stream, like all of my artists have kind of, I would say, strengths in different areas right now. So Ken streams really well. We've got a couple meetings with labels that are interested, bigger labels than the one he's currently on, that are interested in talking about his next project. So that's tomorrow. And it's just a lot of like answering emails. Like, you know, I've mentioned South by because it's in a few weeks. So like Elisa's playing a showcase for Yeti coolers and BMI. I have to like send them her stage plot and, you know, try and set up some marketing advance for that, things like that. So it really varies. And when they're on the road, you know, I might be doing all of this from the back of a venue somewhere. So yeah, it really, you're never bored, that's for sure. But hopefully that answers your question, just to give you like a taste, but the day-to-day changes a lot depending on where someone is in the album cycle.
You all know I love that question. We've talked a lot about time management, and it sounds pretty similar to being an independent artist. Like your brain is all over the place all the time. So you need that nice organized calendar sort of to keep your head on straight. And, you know, you're thinking big project strategy and then also trying to break that down into weeks and days and hours and stuff. So it's a lot of management, and honestly, it's not that different as an artist. And so, you know, continue working on that time management. The students have 3 months to finish a project, and we just talk a lot about how overwhelming it can be to have these sort of 3-month or 6-month or year-long or 10-year-long strategies and goals, and figuring out how do I actually get the next thing done on the list. It can take some practice and some time. And I'm sure, Kristina, you can agree, we all get better at it through the years, and it takes some
Absolutely
time to get good at it. So I love that question. That was awesome. Thanks, Lane. Gavin.
Hi, my name is Gavin Cardita. I'm a drummer and I work in a lot of different music projects. My question for you is that when starting out as a artist manager, what was the hardest aspect for you?
Ooh. The hardest aspect for me starting out was that I didn't yet have relationships I didn't have the relationships yet. And I think that's just the reality of the job, is the most you can do for your artists. It's like everything that you are trying to do for those artists. You're trying to get them signed to a great label. You're trying to get them a better like distribution percentage fee that they're giving up. You're trying to find them the best publicist for their album release, like all of these things that you're trying to do. There are people who answer my emails now who did not answer my emails 7 years ago just because I didn't know them. I hadn't proven myself yet. So I think that was the hardest thing. It's like there's so much to learn. I certainly was making more mistakes. I'll say, like, I of course still make mistakes. But I was definitely like, I didn't know who I was supposed to talk to about anything, and I didn't have the relationships to fall back on. So I'd say that was the biggest challenge. But, like I said earlier, it's a job you can learn by doing. So if you're someone who shows up, I mean, that's the biggest thing. It's just show up, meet people, do what you say you're going to do. And then you start to build relationships that, now when I want to shop someone's album, like people know when I send the music, it's generally good. And there's, some team infrastructure in place that they can already rely on. So it's easier to kind of start those conversations.
We just talked about networking. I did not have you here to confirm every single thing that I've taught them, but it doesn't hurt. Naima, take it away.
Hello, my name's Naima. I guess I'd describe myself as an experimental hip hop producer and rap artist. But I have a question about people talk a lot about the music industry, and I guess I'm wondering what that means when people say the music industry, because it's kind of in some ways, when you're starting out, it feels kind of like this magic box that you want to enter, but isn't really this tangible thing. Like when people say music industry, what are they talking about, more tangibly?
What a good question. I mean, I think at its simplest, they're talking about people who make their living through music. But that we've talked a lot about the artist team and those roles so far, but beyond those, I mean, there are also companies like licensing and sync companies, publishing companies, performing rights organizations. There are all of these different companies that are in the business of music, putting songs in movies, in ads, representing songwriters' rights. And I think I would try not to be too focused on kind of that phrase. Like if you're a musician and you're performing and you're out there, you are in the music industry, genuinely. And it's just a matter of continuing to meet more people in the music industry. Yeah, I mean, I really think it's just people who are making their living in music, that's the music industry, whether it's behind the scenes or in film or on the stage.
Thank you. That was a cool question. I was thinking it's sort of similar to if you are a shoemaker, right? You have maybe you're making shoes in your house and you're selling them on Etsy. You're in the shoe industry. Or if you're the CEO of Nike, you're in the shoe industry. And the music industry is exactly the same. There's all these different levels. And of course, there's top 1%, the CEO of Spotify is probably the king of the music industry right now, but that's the Jeff Bezos of the music industry, right? But we're all in it, just at all these different levels. And I agree with Kristina. Don't stress yourself out too much about being in any kind of capital I music industry. Work on your art and build your team. Those are kind of the main things. And the reality is everybody's going to reach different levels in the industry, right? Like you might remain a small shoemaker with a little shop, or you might rise up and become a designer for Nike. But if you just keep focusing on making your art and doing the thing that you really like, and you focus on meeting people and working with the right people, as opposed to you know, a lot of people think, well, I have to work with the biggest company, you know, and I need to get signed to Universal or whatever. But if you're not vibing with those people and it seems like a really bad deal and they don't understand you or your music, you know, that's not going to be a good situation for you. So make your art and find people who understand your art and want to support you, and you'll end up in the right part of the industry. It's okay if you never get signed to Universal. 99.9% of artists probably won't. So, you know, it's okay if you're not broken into some like higher echelon. Just do your thing exactly where you need to be and keep focusing on growing it and working with the right people, you know, and you'll figure out where you belong. Dylan.
Hi, my name is Dylan Gross. I am an artist and I make some ethereal instrumentals under the name Love Slip. And I guess my question actually got answered a little bit earlier on by Lane. So I'm kind of making up a new one as I go here. But as an artist, the thing I struggle with the most, I think, is relevantly promoting my music. And because I know the name of the game is activity, and staying active to help build trust and build a following. So I was wondering what the best promotional techniques you employ with your artists that you manage are, and how those might translate to someone at my level.
Interesting. I think, yeah, great question. When you say like translate to someone at your level, I kind of feel like good marketing is good certainly people have different resources, but I do think like I don't think anything needs to translate to someone at your level. I think it's almost a question of like, what is your art? And the thing that I am like struggling with a little bit is the artists who I manage are pretty like lyric forward artists. So a lot of the marketing that we do is focused on kind of showcasing lyrics. But I'm a big believer in like social media marketing. I mean, I think for you, things like if you're making ethereal instrumentals, are there like wildlife influencers who you can reach out to and share your music with them, see if they want to use it in their videos? Are there, you know, are you okay with your music being background music while people study sometimes, or do you want people to engage with it really, you know, purposefully, or are both options okay? If you're all right with it being background music, I mean, I think there are tons of opportunities there. You can connect with independent film festivals and offer, you know, to let them sync your music into their films for just a few $100, like a great deal for them. You can pitch it on streaming to, you know, study playlists, things like that. So I think it's really just thinking about what are your goals? Who are the people who might benefit from your music, and like who can you have mutual benefit with? And how do you reach them?
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So with your artists who are more lyric forward, what are some, I guess, social media tactics that you've seen that have been pretty successful?
I love it when artists cover. So let's say you're an artist, you've already got some great stuff going on. You've got some great songs out, you've been touring, you're building a following. I love it when artists like cover bigger artists who they want to open for, because those bigger artists like are going to see that, and it helps show that there's like a genuine connection there, genuine love of their music. And I've seen that lead to like great tour. You know, I have a friend who covered a Elle King song on Instagram and then was offered some opening dates. So it's like that kind of thing can really work, and I enjoy that personally.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely covers are an amazing way to get some discovery, especially on YouTube. We did a Brandy Carlisle cover for Mother's Day one time. So her song was called The Mother, and we posted it on Mother's Day, and it like did super, super well. Brandy Carlisle didn't find us, unfortunately. However, one other thing about social media, just to give you all some ideas, something I do is I make a list of like holidays and artists that I love, their birthdays and things like that. And if you can think of different, we're going to talk about social media strategy pretty soon, but if you can make a big calendar and just kind of brainstorm, what would be something great to post on Valentine's Day, or, oh, it's Brandy Carlisle's birthday today, like I'll do a cover today, things where people are sort of thinking of that date in an important way, or if you can inform them of that date, like, oh, today is Miles Davis's birthday, here's some information about Miles Davis, like stuff like that is really cool. I've read in a lot of social media marketing information that if you can be informative while you're being entertaining, that's really helpful. So if you can attach a cover or something to an interesting fact about the day, or about, something going on in the world, that those posts do actually tend to do really well. So instead of always talking about yourself, I mean, you should be, and you should be able to self-promote in that way. It's great to connect it to somebody else or to information people find interesting as a means of discovery. So then folks will find you, and then they'll be interested to hear, what you do. But try to think about the ways that you can introduce yourself to the world first, because people aren't always necessarily interested in what you're making immediately. So if there's ways to introduce yourself, and covers are amazing for that. So that's a great
Yeah.
idea. Brandon.
Hi, my name is Brandon. I'm a guitarist. I play metal and like rock and roll. And so one of the questions I have is, you talked about like one of your artists, Ken Yates, doing like streaming. So like when you do streaming, is the point of that to like interact with the fans you already have, or is it to like reach a wider audience? Like what do you really get out of streaming?
Definitely both. Great question. So I think Ken, we've seen a lot of success in terms of his music reaching new people. Like we see covers of his songs posted by college students like almost every day. And that's through discovery via algorithmic streaming. So when people are focused on streaming, I think sometimes there's this huge emphasis on how do I get on, the big Spotify playlists. And certainly those are fantastic. But I actually feel like the best discovery comes from the algorithmic suggested music that is kind of like when you hit the end of an album and music keeps playing, like that's where you want your artist's music to be, because people are going to hear that, and when they're already listening to something they love, and they're going to be like, oh, this sounds really good. So yeah, I mean, I think with streaming, it's a both thing. You definitely want to be reaching new people, and I think to do that, there are tools that you can use, like Spotify Canvas, the little looping video that plays on your phone when a song goes on, that like increases engagement with a song hugely. You want to make sure you're pitching your music to the editorial team at Spotify through your Spotify for Artists account at least 3 weeks before a release. And you want to try and make sure that your music is on, like, never buy playlist spots, never buy streams. It will just screw up your data forever. But yeah, there are like a lot of different ways to do it. And I think collaborations is a great way also. Like that's something I've like Ken, there's this band Tiny Habits that he is really friendly with, and like I would say like have a much bigger TikTok footprint than Ken. So they collaborated on a song together, and that was like mutually beneficial and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you. KK?
Yeah, so sorry, my computer camera's like not working. But also, my name's KK. I'm kind of like a well-rounded musician. Like I love playing instruments and like singing and songwriting, and like a little bit of producing. But I guess my question is like, is there anything that inspires you, but also like how do you stay motivated while also trying to keep like your artists motivated?
That's a great question. The music is the thing that continues to inspire me. And that's something where I try to listen to my artist's music like really regularly, just because it's a great reminder of like why we're doing what we're doing. But also seeing them play, like they're just all three of them are so good live, and being able to go out and see them connect with their fans in person and see the way that people respond to their music is so motivating. Um, and I think that kind of commitment to always going back to the music is similarly what I try and remind my artists to like stay motivated with, because it is a really demanding job. I mean, you know, one of the artists on my roster did over 100 dates on the road last year. Things are not slowing down, things are just speeding up. There are like so many demands on her time, and just trying to build in space for her to write new music, for her to rest, for her to go into the studio and record again. All of those things are things we have to be really like cognizant of, and make sure we're creating space for it. Because if you don't create space for it by saying no to some things, like it'll never get done. And then you lose, like, what's the point? The point is that she's an incredible writer who creates music that touches people's souls. And if that's the point, then we need to like protect that from the many demands of the industry. So I think kind of always going back to that music as the starting point is something I really try and remember by listening to it, by sharing, you know, looking at the calendar and saying, hey, we don't have any studio time for you for the next 6 months. Like, let's pick a week and block it off now. So yeah.
That was such a great question and such an awesome response to it. I told you all that I cried on a Zoom meeting with Kristina a few weeks ago. And like it can just be such a grueling job. And since talking to Kristina, we've been recording some of our songs again, and truly just hearing. I mean, I don't mean to sound self whatever. I don't know what the word is. Too cocky, or that's a terrible word, but listening to the song and loving how good they are, and what a good writer I am. You know, like you write a song and you kind of forget how good it is, and going back and recording and listening to like, wow, how did I come up with those lyrics, really keeps things a little bit more guided. And so keeping your love of what you do really strong. For a lot of artists, that means kind of practicing every day and picking up their instrument and just hearing the sound of their own voice. It gives you this chance to give yourself important feedback of, I'm good and my writing is good, you know, because many days you're receiving rejection emails and that's feeling like I'm really bad. All the research on burnout suggests that the lack of positive feedback is something that makes people burn out in their job. So that's easy to imagine if you're in a office setting that your boss never gives you positive feedback and you eventually quit and try to burn down the office, you know, like that's an easy example when it comes to an office space. But as an artist and as a manager as well, I'm sure you're receiving many rejection emails and people all the time who just can't work with you or even don't want to. I think we tell artists and we tell people in the music industry, oh, rejection is just part of it and you need to deal with it. While that's very true, we need to acknowledge the emotional toll it takes to do a job that really does come with a lot of rejection, and figure out how to get positive feedback. Because if we don't have that positive feedback, we will get really burnt out. So for me, that's been playing my songs and liking them, or singing because I like the sound of my voice. And another great thing has been these conferences and these network opportunities where other people have said to me, your songs are so good. And we tell ourselves we don't need that external validation, but the truth is, if somebody that you respect says, I really like that song, it really does help with that kind of constant, like, my metrics on social media aren't very good, or I'm getting negative comments online, or I'm getting rejection emails. I mean, all that is par for the course. And instead of saying to yourself, I'm supposed to be strong and not need any external validation, rejection's part of the job, acknowledge that our souls need some positive feedback, like, to keep going. And so wherever you can find that, if your friends love your songs, if your parents love your songs, if you really just love the music that you make, then do what Kristina does and just sit down and listen to your music for a while and be like, this is actually really good, you know? And getting 10,000 rejection emails or not getting onto any Spotify playlist is just kind of par for the course and doesn't mean you suck, you know? So I finally in my life have acknowledged that we actually need some level of positive feedback to keep, you know, your eyes on the road. Otherwise, you know, it's just a recipe for hating your job. If you're just staring at a screen, seeing your terrible Instagram metrics all the time, you're going to quit. So that was such a good question. I loved that. Antonio.
Hi, my name is Antonio Viscondo. I make beats and I'm a songwriter. I kind of just had like a hypothetical question. So basically, I'm very passionate about songwriting and making beats, but one thing like I'm not very like strongly like, interested in is like the vocal aspect of that. And so I'm wondering like in terms of like, for example, making an album, like, do you think the route of just making the beats and then maybe collaborating with separate artists on the album, like having them be the main artist singing the song, but have it be different artists? Do you feel like that's a way to kind of get more like, is that like a smart move in that aspect, or do you feel like that's a way to kind of like be scattering yourself?
No, I love that idea. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, I think you can look at an artist like Santana. That's like what he does. You know, he's the guitarist on all of his albums, and then he has different vocalists on all the songs. I think it's a great way to collaborate with a broad selection of vocalists. I think it gives you the opportunity to work with artists in different genres so that you're not pigeonholed into any one geographic area, any one genre. And I feel like it's a great way to showcase your songwriting and your beat making, because I mean, being a songwriter and not a performer is a career all in itself. And you know, if that's something where you're interested in being in writers' rooms, maybe the path for you is pursuing a publishing deal where you have a company that is putting you into a bunch of rights, and that's how you build your music career. And I think doing that kind of an album would be a perfect step towards that. It's a great idea.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Do it, Antonio. I can't wait to see it. Michi. Michi, you there?
Might have been bad timing on a freeze.
Oh, yeah. I think, oh, perfect. Okay. So Michi put the question in the chat, which I love. Wi-Fi isn't good. Yeah. I'm a beginner singer songwriter in the indie rock genre. My question is, what are some important skills to have as an artist to maintain a healthy work environment with a manager? That is such a good question.
A great question. So I think oh man, there are just so many thoughts right now. It's such a good question. So me and my artists, I think we try and maintain a perspective of like, there's no such thing as too much communication. So asking a lot of questions and being flexible with the understanding that priorities and work, like the division of work, is going to change as an artist's career grows. Like the way that I worked with all of the artists on my roster at the beginning of my relationships with them is not the same as what we do now because things have changed. Like when I started working with Ken Yates, he didn't have a booking agent. So I was doing a lot of booking support for him, but now he does. So I do less of that. Like, but on the flip side, he does a lot more co-writing. So I'm more involved in that. Like with Elisa, she is a great example of like an artist who has just come to understand herself so much better now than when we started working together. So like a lot of what we do now is actually like say no to opportunities that might not be, that might take from her energy without like giving enough back. So a lot of what we do is kind of communicate about, hey, is this opportunity one you want to take or is it not? I think just having like really open communication, the ability to receive feedback, not as an attack, the ability to give feedback in a way that is loving and compassionate. But, and yeah, I mean, I have like a list of like Kristina tasks and artist tasks for each artist. And we'll kind of review those at the end of every year. I also do recommend, like I do end of year meetings with each artist on the roster where we look at what were our primary goals last year? How did it go? What do we want to do this year? And kind of take that time to evaluate in a positive frame of mind. I think that's really great. But overall, I would say communication, asking for help when you need it, making sure your manager knows they can ask for help when they need it. And kind of divvying up responsibilities into different buckets would be a few recommendations on my end.
I love that. Yeah. Honest and open communication is key. That's true for me too, you guys. If you ever need help, make sure you're emailing and talking. Good skill to have in life, you know. Griffin.
Hello, my name's Griffin. A guitar player, songwriter, learning how to engineer. I do different things. I have two questions. One's hopefully short, but what do you have like a memory of listening to music or an album or something that like got you really excited at a young age? And like, yeah, what's that? And also, I guess at what point were you like, did you decide that managing was the route that you wanted to take? Like, did you play music when you were younger? And I don't know. I mean, there's so many different ways to participate in music. And I guess at what point did you realize that this was the route that made sense for you?
Those are really fun questions. Thank you. The early memories for me, I like was obsessed with the Spice Girls. They were my first concert. My dad took me to see them and I really just like, I don't know, I just loved it. The dancing, the music, the experience of like a band that just gives an audience joy, like loved that. And then this is kind of hilarious now. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Josie and the Pussycats. It's a cult classic, let's say. But I saw that.
They're very young, Kristina.
I know. And it's like that movie's not even on streaming. It's so, I don't understand.
It was great though. It was so good.
It was great. And you know what? I'm just gonna drop the hit song from it into the chat so that you can all hear it later. But it is kind of ironic because like the manager is the evil character in that movie. But it was a fantastic movie about a band that made me start thinking for the first time about like an industry beyond being an artist. But certainly, you know, I grew up singing. I just have always loved music. And I didn't know what artist management was until after college. I really didn't. I was working in a venue and an artist there suggested I think about management. And he took a lot of time when I started to help educate me in that area. So for me, it was finally like, it was more like I didn't know that I wanted to go into management. It was like I found myself doing some artist management and it felt like, oh, I've found the right fit. And I think that's something that people should be excited about, is like the path that you think you want to pursue. It might be the path that you continue pursuing, but it might just help lead you to something that's even more exciting to you. Like for me, I thought I wanted to work in festival programming. That was the dream. But then I found that like working at events, I wanted more of my evenings free. Like I still travel a lot. I'm on tour a fair amount. I go to a lot of shows at night. Like I give up plenty of nights, but not as much as when I was working in music events. So that was something that I didn't know until I was living it. And just, yeah, I think you kind of find your way by trying a lot of different things. But LOL, I can't believe I just sent you all a song from Josie and the Pussycats, but
They get plenty.
you're welcome.
They get plenty of just cheesy, like elder millennial stuff from me all the time too. So it's okay.
It's great.
I have to second the Spice Girls. Very influential in the late 90s. Since we have no more hands up, I'm going to ask you a question and give everybody an opportunity for the last bit of hand raising if you have a pressing question. I know some of you probably have had your questions answered already, but if you haven't. So some of the students are starting to think about creating and releasing their first things, whether it's a single or an EP or an album. We're all over the map. We also have very limited recording capabilities here, so we're running into the fact that many of them are going to have to be doing sort of demos and dealing with DIY recording. Anyway, that's not relevant. When artists are preparing for their first releases, or maybe are a couple of years out from their first official releases, how do they start building a fan base? Often music can feel a little bit like, well, I can't get a manager until I have fans, but I can't get fans until I have a manager. It can feel a little bit like the entry level position that needs 10 years of experience. And so many of my students ask me, how do I get my first fans? What would you say would be top priority for someone in that position?
I mean, I think the answer has changed a lot in recent years. And I do think that TikTok and like is a really key part of that now. Like it is in many ways a music discovery platform. I've seen several, just like in my life, I've seen several careers like really launch from finding fans on TikTok. So I think that is not to be ignored. But also like, I don't know, there's the old school way, perform. And I know it's like easier said than done, but Worcester does have some venues and Boston has some venues. And I know it's like maybe a lot to get not just off campus, but also into Boston. But you can look up, venues like Brighton Music Hall, Rockwood, Boston, Club Passim for the singer-songwriters. You can look at the calendars, find artists who don't have openers listed, who you feel like, oh, I'm a good fit for that, and reach out to that venue and see if you can open the show. I do think just kind of like building your experience performing is so important. The more you can play, the better.
Agreed. And it is a bit of a slog at first, so don't expect your first year of performing to be like highly lucrative and whatever, but at every single show you can absolutely make one fan. And if you can keep those 50 fans with you, we've got some from the very beginning of our career and they're patrons now, or they give to Kickstarter or whatever. So that one person that we met at our first show has probably invested $1,000 into what we do now. So don't undersell playing live, and be really cool and nice to every single fan that you meet, and you'll keep them with you. It's a general business idea that retaining customers is cheaper than finding brand new customers. So really try to keep your fans close to you.
Yeah.
Elise, their voice is not feeling awesome today, so they asked if they can put the question in the chat. I'm going to respond and say absolutely. we probably only have time for maybe one more. Is there anything else that's pressing you, Kristina? Anything that we didn't get to that you're like chomping at the bit to say?
I mean, if I had pieces of advice for a room full of artists, I really would say just like focus on your art. Your art is going to get so much better over the next, like, I'm not saying it's not already good. You're probably already making very good art, but like work on your art, play as much as you can. You're just going to get better and better and more confident as you do it.
Yeah. And your art being good really is paramount. I mean,
Yeah.
the music industry, capital I, lowercase I, is shiny object syndrome. We're all of a sudden spending 10 hours on TikTok and 2 minutes on writing a new song. And it's like, you really have to balance getting your art really good and getting your 10,000 hours of practice under your belt, because you could have the best TikTok in the world and it go mega viral. The next step, somebody, a label or whoever, is going to ask you to go on tour. And if your live show sucks, that might be the end of everything for you. So you really want the skill and the artistry to go along with all the other millions of things that you're doing. It's such an empty, to me, I mean, I'm sure there are artists that this is absolutely not true, but I'm a little old school and I'm just like, honestly, I don't care how viral you went. I want to see a damn good show and I want to hear a damn good song, you know? So Elise asked a perfect last question. I think this is an awesome way to wrap things up. I was just wondering what the most important thing you've learned from your job is, whether it be music related or just generally. That's an awesome question.
That is an awesome question. To surround yourself with people you like talking to, and to celebrate small wins, celebrate the wins along the way. There's a lot of anxiety in the music industry and in pursuing a career like this. And I think working with people who you deeply respect and taking time to celebrate those wins is really important.
Awesome. Well, this was awesome. It was so nice to have you. You're my favorite guest speaker I've had in a while, and I had my husband on Tuesday, so we really appreciate your time. And I recorded the meeting and we'll throw it into Canvas if anybody wants to rewatch. I think that's it. I will read your questions, and if I feel like there was a question that would be great for Kristina to answer, you know, I'll give my input on the questions that you asked on your homework as well. But if there's something that I'm like, oh, I can't believe you didn't ask this in the meeting, I'll try to forward it on and see if we can get a better answer for you. So thank you all so much for your questions. They were so insightful and really amazing questions. And I have a lot of hope for all of your careers. And Kristina, we really appreciate having you today.
Yeah, thank you all so much. It's a pleasure meeting you and speaking to you, and wishing you guys all the best as you launch your careers.
All right. Thank you. See ya.
Thank you. Have a good one.